Hi, everyone. Welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace. I'm Vince Mickens. As much as we talk about the wide variety of career opportunities in aviation, something as basic as learning how to fly is still one of the hottest topics and of interest to many in and outside the aviation arena. Today's show will represent a great cross-section of a couple of passionate aviators who are pursuing the ultimate professional pilot career, and an author who, while learning to fly, decided to step back and take a look, get a better understanding of how pursuing something as basic as getting a private pilot's license can be a bit daunting to many who are completely unfamiliar with aviation. I get it, because every time someone finds out I'm a pilot, the very first thing that they ask is, so what airline do you fly for? And when I say I fly private and add to that it's for personal and business, they say, oh, while looking at me like a deer in the headlights. Even my kids who used to fly with me since they were in car seats, that's always a sight, by the way, putting car seats in a small 4 or 6 passenger single engine aircraft, even they found it challenging to explain to their peers. Like any career path or simply venturing out to try something new, there's always fascinating stories to hear about. This show will be no exception. Joining me is Abigail Dang, a proud 20-year-old certified flight instructor from Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm jealous. Abigail, who currently is teaching at Barber's Point Flight School, is well on her way to becoming a professional pilot. Now get this. She soloed, as in flew an airplane for the first time by herself on her 16th birthday. And still, before getting her driver's license, still having mom take her to the airport, she earned her private pilot's license on her 17th birthday. Then went on to earn 3 more pilot ratings while obtaining, get this, a Bachelor of Science in Aviation with a concentration in being a professional pilot degree from Liberty University. Yep, she's that girl. More about Abigail a little later. Speaking of Abby's, also with us today is Abby Awosanya. She's also a commercially rated pilot, currently training at United Airlines United Aviate Academy out in Phoenix, Arizona. While Abby has always had an interest in flying, how many times have we heard that? It wasn't until her discovery flight 3 years ago, that's going up in a small plane to see if you actually like it, that she realized she wanted to pursue becoming a professional pilot, which, by the way, means flying for the airlines or business aviation as in corporate or charter or cargo or medevac and so on. Now, Abby's all in, actively involved in several aviation organizations, from the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals and Sisters of the Skies to Women in Aviation International. Yep, lots to talk about with Abby, which makes for a perfect segue to the author of the book, Demystiflying. Nope, I didn't mispronounce it. Demystiflying. Fun play on the word and the concept of demystifying all of the mystery in learning to fly. Kine Paulsen interviewed over 200 pilots about their experiences, challenges, and triumphs in becoming pilots. A student pilot herself who never really had being a pilot on her radar, at least not initially, had her own challenges and decided to write a book for the many who might be experiencing the same. Ladies, welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's really great to have everybody here. And as we were talking about before we got started, this show has really caught a lot of people's attention. And we're simply going to be talking about learning to fly. But I think there are so many people that are fascinated with flying, fascinated with all aspects of aviation and aerospace, that the thought of, oh yeah, I've always wanted to learn to fly. Let me hear about this, I think has really gotten us started with this. All of us kind of vividly remember our first flight experience. We remember that first time we went up and took the controls of an aircraft. I know all of us pilots, we can remember that day very specifically and that experience. Abigail, you were, and I'm finding out now because I'm realizing that there's a two parts with you. First, the first time you went up and put your hands on a control, you were 13 years old, sitting co-pilot, and having that experience, which I thought was really funny when we were talking about it, because you said, yeah, I was 13, but I was so overwhelmed with excitement that I barely could pay attention to what was going on in terms of what kind of plane I was in, et cetera, and so forth. And then when you turned 15 and you went up for the first time for an actual flight lesson, you had been dreaming of flying for a very long time. You can tell us how long, since a very young age. And there's no aviation in your family, so this is all you. But what was your first experience like when you first put your hands on the controls? I'm going to say two times. When you were 13 and again when you were being instructed at 15. What was that? What did that physically feel like for you to do that?
Not to be generic, but I felt like just the moment the airplane took off, like I felt free, which is, why a lot of people love aviation, and just coming off the ground. And it was like a fresh breath of air, a little higher than I usually get. And I was just enamored. My first flight was in Seattle, which is the only flight I've ever done outside of Hawaii in a small plane. And I was absolutely blown away by the views. And I thankfully wasn't too nervous. My mom, of course, was very nervous. She was in the back seat with my sister. And
that'll make her nervous, just that.
My sister was pretty nervous
for the first time, and they're in the back seat.
And said, "My sister's flying the airplane." Okay. Yeah, but they've thankfully been so supportive and loving of everything since then.
The actual physical handling of the plane, what was that like for you? What would you compare it to, if anything?
Well, I hadn't driven a car before, and I would definitely say I vastly prefer flying over driving, especially in Hawaii traffic.
Probably safer too.
Much safer. Less crazy mad people up there. It almost felt natural. Even though I had never been in an airplane before, taking controls of it, I was like, it's not hard. It's
right.
Flying an airplane physically is surprisingly very easy. And the person sitting left seat who was, kind of talking me through, he had the throttles and everything. So I had the easy part of with the yoke. And of course I went the opposite direction when he told me to go east. So since then I've learned the correct direction with the compass.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Especially now that you're teaching others.
Exactly. And I totally understand when they don't understand. And I'm like, it's all right. It goes the opposite direction. It felt very natural and free and empowering, being in control of something like that and just having the entire sky to yourself.
Yeah, the sky to yourself part. And I try not to interject too much of my own flying, but I can't help it sometimes. But one of the things that I've always enjoyed about flying is no matter how busy I am, no matter how much I have on my plate, both personally and professionally, when I get up in the air, it's just me and the airplane and the controllers if necessary. And that's it. And I'm in a different world, and I stay in that world until I land. And I kind of enjoy that escape. So I totally get what you're saying. Abby, how about you? When you went up on that demonstration flight, and I believe that was your first time, and I'm gathering that it was also your first time in a small airplane. What was that like for you? And when the flight instructor said, okay, take the controls, it's your airplane. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so my discovery flight was the first time I ever flew in a small aircraft. And I wish I could say like Abigail that when I first took off, it was like exhilarating, but I was actually very nervous and scared when I first took off. When I got to the airport, my instructor then was just doing the pre-flight and telling me all these things about the aircraft and showing me the instruments inside the aircraft, and everything just went over my head. Like I had no idea what was going on, but I just knew I wanted to get into the air. And then during takeoff, I was just absolutely scared and very nervous, just because it's my first time in a small aircraft. But eventually we got to cruise altitude, and then my nerves eventually settled. I realized everything was fine and that we're safe. And that's when I really started to enjoy the discovery flight. But when I took controls for the first time, I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, this is a lot of fun, and how like natural and easy it is. You just can turn the yoke left and right to steer left and right. And then we did a couple of climbs and descents and some steep turns and whatnot. But it was just a very fun flight. And it was also like during golden hour, during the nighttime. And so we had the beautiful sunset in the Washington, D.C. area. And there was like hues of purple and orange and yellow. And it was just a very like a romantic flight, like with myself and my future, and just like the D.C. area. It was very beautiful and like kind of romanticized in a way. And I just loved it. Like, I loved being in the air. I loved seeing the sunset over the Washington, D.C. area. I loved taking control of the planes. It was just a lot of fun.
So was it from that point that you were like, oh, I'm going in a new direction career-wise?
Yeah, from that point, I kind of had a strong inkling that I was definitely going to do this for a career. And so from then on, I started to like research ways that I can start pursuing flying professionally.
Yeah. Kine, this is the perfect segue to you because her initial reaction was, it was literally going over her head mentally about all of the things in the cockpit and probably what was going on the radio with communications with air traffic control, et cetera, et cetera. And you've had this experience when you first started, took your first flight lesson. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and then how that ended up making you say, you know what, I need to write a book and share this and get more information from other pilots and really put this out here for people to have a better understanding, people that have no understanding about
Right.
anything related to aviation, but are still fascinated and interested in it?
I mean, I feel like I had a combination of the two experiences. I was super excited. And then it was Orange County, beautiful Southern California. So there was the beauty of it. But then there was I remember like there was a Southwest Airlines plane taking off right before we did. And I thought, can I trust the person I'm flying with? There was just so many emotions. And then there was, I've always been a person who likes to complete what I set out to do. So there was a moment of, I'm going to do this. And then can I have other people started with these emotions and people just love it? And then asking about the pathway, to me, it was really hard to understand the private pilot route, simply because I didn't have the know-how before I went there. And I just really wanted to connect with people who weren't necessarily professional pilots that were going the hobby pilot route. And over time, I realized that a lot of the questions that I had were questions that other people had, and that became the book.
Yeah.
And I've heard that's my favorite question is the first flight for people, because it is a combination of nerves and excitement and overwhelmed, and no one sits at the first flight lesson just saying, I got it all.
Yeah. And so one of the things, we always talk about the career aspect of flying and everything, but you use the term hobby pilot, but I think it's apropos because we're talking about people that get their private pilot's license just so that they can, have fun going places, going there quicker. Instead of doing the 4, 6, 8, or 10-hour drive, you want to go hiking or camping or skiing or golfing or whatever. And you can get together with a group of friends, and one of you is a pilot and qualified in that particular aircraft. You can load that aircraft up and go have some fun. And the world of flying is just there's something about it anyhow that keeps us all drawn in. I'm a little biased, but absolutely on that. I'm going to come back to you, Abigail, because I think, first of all, you live in one of the best places in the world to fly, one of the most scenic,
I would agree,
sure, in Hawaii. But the other part of it is that you come from a family that has no history of aviation whatsoever, but yet you already had an inkling about and an interest in it from a very young age. And I think the most impressive thing is about your determination. Soloing at 16, getting your private at 17, and then going to school online and getting 3 more very significant ratings all at the same time. I don't know if that's multitasking. Are you a little crazy? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, yes, a good balance of everything.
I think I think it's admirable, and I'd like for particularly for our audience to hear, what your motivation was, because it's also an expensive proposition, and so you needed some help with scholarships and things about that. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, of course. Definitely. It was just my love of flying that kept me going, and just this determination to get there. I've kind of been in a rush, which I now realize I'm like, I never stopped to smell the flowers as much as I wish I had, and just enjoyed life and being young. But I also am glad for having, accelerated through it. But yeah, finances wise, I wouldn't have been able to do any of it if not how fast I did it, with how many scholarships I was able to get. It paid for everything. I am completely debt free as both a graduate and as a pilot, which just immensely, hugely blessing, and not
it is.
having to be burdened by that
it's
going into a career.
Major.
Yes.
Yeah. On the scholarship side of things, so I've done shows about scholarships. And one of the things I've heard from the people that issue the scholarships, and then I've heard from people that apply for them, a lot of young people are intimidated. People your age are intimidated by the process. What was it that you, besides your drive and your passion for aviation, what helped you get through that process to really go after as many scholarships as you could, and be effective with that?
I knew it was the only way. I had even applied for and done part-time jobs while doing high school. I knew that scholarships would be the only way to have a huge financial burden, because I also knew, talking with my flight instructor and with all the other pilots that I had talked with, that consistency and proficiency and constantly flying throughout multiple times a week was really vital to being efficient with your money, and as well as the speed at which you get to your ratings. And so I wouldn't fly until I had the money to consistently fly with a scholarship or so, to fly 2-3 times a week. Being homeschooled helped.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm
no, that's a
so
great point about the consistency. I tell people that all the time, including my own kids who may one day at least get their private licenses. But I tell people that all the time, that trying to do it in a flow where you're consistent with it. One, it's less expensive because you're on top of it, and the other is that it's just more. It's overall, it's just easier to do because you won't lose anything if you're flying 2 or 3 times a week. Whereas if you spread it out, then you have to relearn some stuff and all of those kind of things. So I think that was very, very smart and astute on your part.
Thank you. Yeah. And being a flight instructor and kind of witnessing the balance of, okay, it's financial need is huge with aviation, and people have lives and jobs outside of flying when they want to pursue their private pilot license. And so I had a lot of students who could only fly once a week, and that was okay. I was like, we're going to fly as often as you want to, as you can. And just as long as you stay in aviation, either whether it be studying or flying, that's going to help you continue that momentum. Versus I have students once a week, it would take them around a year to finish their private pilot. And then I had some students that were flying 2-3 times a week, and they got it done much faster. And it's not that either one of them was a better pilot. It was just that their skills didn't deteriorate over the week.
Yeah, absolutely. Abby, how did you discover United Airlines United Aviate Academy? So when we left off, we were talking about you got inspired with the Discovery flight. Tell us what happened after that and how the United Aviate Academy came into the picture.
Yes. So I was connected to a local aviation group in my hometown of Maryland called Aviation Ministry. And it's a group of people at a church who just have a passion for aviation and get together and talk about things in the industry or different events that we can do in the area that's related to aviation. And so one of my mentors in the group, Herb Lacey, he made this opportunity aware to me. We had like a presentation during a group meeting once about the announcement of United Aviate Academy, and the steps that you had to take to get into the academy. And so that's how I was first made aware of United Aviate Academy. And it took me a while before I actually committed to it, just because I first saw the price tag to come here. I knew I didn't have the financial resources to go to a full-time flight school at the time. But
you brought up a very good point, though. It is something you have to pay your way through. The term academy can be a kind of a misnomer, because it seems like, okay, you get accepted into this and then, you know, they've got it, but it's more of a pathway.
Yes. And so I still just decided to apply because I already started doing my flight lessons at home at that time, and knew that I wanted to pursue this full time. And so I thought, let me just apply and see what happens. I didn't think that I would get in, but I did get in, and that was a shock to me. And so once I got in, it was just like, oh, wait, how do I afford this now that I got in? But
the cart before the horse.
Yeah. And so I applied to a scholarship to attend the academy, and I was awarded the scholarship. And so really I wouldn't be here without the help of scholarships.
Sure. What was your experience in applying for scholarships? And, you know, when you first started doing it and going through that application process, and most scholarships require an essay to talk about your passion and interest in flying and things like that. So what was that like for you?
Yeah. So I found that starting early was very helpful. Like as soon as the scholarship application opened, read the requirements and what you have to write about, as well as what recommendations you have to submit, and then just get the ball rolling on that early. You don't have to submit the application all in one day, but if you take some time to really think about how you want to answer the scholarship question, and which letters of recommendation might speak best to the scholarship, that was also helpful in just having your application in early and on time. But I found that a lot of these scholarship applications want to know that, one, you have a passion for aviation, and two, that they can trust you with the funds that they're giving you, and that you show in your application that you can successfully complete whatever training you are going through, so that you have the drive to do it and you have the resources to do it as well.
Yeah. Kine, you interviewed over 200 pilots, which that in itself, but I guess that's what you do when you write a book. Over 200 pilots about their experiences, their challenges, their triumphs of becoming pilots, and on all different levels, and things like that. Some pretty famous ones too that you had a chance to do the interviews with. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that was applied to the book that you wrote?
Yeah, I mean, all great conversations. And I think this is a really good point. None of them, I can't remember anyone who said finances wasn't a part of it, famous or not. One of my favorite interviews was with Bob Pittman, who started MTV. And he actually looked at the skies not having the funds when he was 15 and said, I want to become a pilot. And so one of his first part-time jobs, I think he had 6, was being a radio DJ, but that kind of propelled him into the radio world. And he currently still has his ATP, but he flies as he flies privately, but, has become very successful in business. And I think what you girls bring up is, if there's a will, there's a way, and there's so many ways to find the funding. And I cover that a lot in my book, that some of these scholarships don't even have any recipients because no one applies every year. So I would say kind of go like cart before the horse, make sure that you like flying, and the finances will, I'm not saying it's easy, but the finances will kind of find their way. And there's so many stories of that in my book too.
So, Kine, one of the things you talked about when we talked about a week ago, you mentioned that finding a good flying, it's all that's on the brain. Sorry. Finding a good flight instructor and a good flight school is not always as easy as it sounds, particularly if it's somebody is not immersed in aviation. They know nothing about the industry. And I wanted to mention that too. I think there are several aviation organizations, mentioned them earlier, OBAP, the Organization for Black Aerospace Professionals, Women in Aviation International, AOPA, Aircraft Owner and Pilots Association, NBAA, National Business Aviation Association, EAA, Experimental Aircraft Association, and I could go on and on. But those are some of the ones that really are stand out there. And all of those associations have really great information about flying. The funny thing is that I have recommended people to go to an AOPA.org, and they go to the website and they're like, oh, this is really cool. So anyhow, I'm interested in flying. Where do I start? And I think that comes back to the point of your book, that there are people that are fascinated with and interested in flying, but they really don't know what to expect or how to get started. So again, coming full circle, in terms of finding a good instructor, which you went through an experience with, and finding a good flight school and those type of things, tell us a little bit about that from your perspective.
So my personal inspiration was I didn't necessarily know how to find the right school or the instructor. I found myself really overwhelmed by everything that was going on, from the pre-flight to the flying lesson. And I didn't really have the ground to trust my instincts. So I started researching what questions do I ask a flight instructor? What things do I look for in a school? And to your point, there's so many great resources out there. And I think what ends up happening as we proceed in the world of aviation is that we forget that we didn't always speak pilot with these technical terms. So as much as there's passion and love behind wanting to explain concepts, they quickly get really technical. And for me, that was really overwhelming. If I was trying to find some piece of information and there was a technical term attached to it, I just felt like I didn't necessarily, like, now I have to Google something that I was trying to understand from a different category. So,
and even when you Google it, you're like, okay, so what does that mean?
Exactly. So my goal is, my goal was always that the book was speaking to a non-pilot, and that pilots would pick up the book and understand, of course, what I wrote, but it wasn't intended for the pilot.
Which is brilliant. It's funny. You guys probably earlier, heard me saying things like certified flight instructor instead of CFI. But I have found, both with me being a pilot and a lot of my guests on, I've had to actually say to them, hey, listen, we got to keep this really simple now, because we have a lot of people that are not in aviation. And if you start throwing out a bunch of acronyms and various terms, they're just going to be staring at the screen going, So I think that brings up I actually think it's really brilliant about your book, because it brings up a really valid point. Anything in particular that stands out to you from some of your, like the story you just shared, any other stories that stand out to you about those kind of experiences from people that, have now been flying for a long time and enjoying it, but maybe starting out, it was a little bit on the rough side?
I mean, there are so many stories to pick from. I remember personally getting airsick and thinking that was going to stop me in my tracks, and then finding out that massive legendary pilots have also struggled with air sickness.
Like Bob Hoover.
Exactly. Chuck Yeager also at some point.
And Chuck Yeager.
One of the things I also really enjoyed was hearing stories of people who started but then stopped, either for financial reasons or other reasons, and then started again. I think ideally everyone would fly 2-3 times a week, but life happens. And it was really inspiring for me to hear that people have picked it up later in a different way. So there's so many great stories.
You're like, how much time do you have? Abigail, you are a flight instructor currently. You're very active teaching. You're teaching single, multi-engine, inland and instrument and things like that. And so you seem to have a full schedule with students. What can you share with us and from an advice standpoint besides the consistency of trying to fly as frequently as you can afford it and are available, but also what are some of the other things that you find now that you're on the instructing side? And it's a really short window, Abigail, because you were just a student and now you're teaching. So, which is great. But what have you found?
That's a really good question. Other than consistency, I mean, other than just flying, just the studying and being curious, staying curious, have fun. Don't get too swept up in trying to be the best at flying, because you're not. I'm still not the best at flying. And I was just a student, you know, a year-ish, 2 years, almost 2 years ago.
Ooh, long
and
time.
You know, no. And the saying that we in aviation is a good pilot is always learning. So I'm a perfectionist. So I sometimes got swept up and frustrated with myself for not knowing things and not knowing everything. You can't know everything. So
absolutely. No, you're always learning. That's a great point too.
Yeah, just continue to be curious and learn, have fun, do fun flying every once in a while. If you're doing flight training and you're kind of getting sick of the traffic patterns landing over 100 million times a day, go and do a fun scenic flight, or go and grab a $100 hamburger like they have on the mainland. For us in Hawaii, it's like a $300 Maui Krispy Kreme donuts, and
wow.
Have fun with it.
So you have Krispy Kreme on. There's a reason to come to Hawaii.
Only one, and it's only on Maui. So
always. That's a very expensive donut.
Maui, the very, very expensive, but it's usually several dozen.
And go to Krispy Kreme.
Exactly. Yeah, we're like, okay, if you're going to Maui, you better bring 5 dozen back for us, because we're not going to get it again for a whole month.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah. No, I think you bring up some really valid points, especially with regard to enjoying flying, even though you're also learning. That's what I was going to say too. It's a constant learning. I know pilots with, 20, 30,000, literally with 20 or 30,000 hours of flying, and they still talk about stuff that they learn, which is pretty amazing when you figure somebody's been flying for decades and having all these experience and still talking about it. I got to know, very privileged to know people like Brigadier General Charles E. McGee, the Tuskegee Airman, and who was one of the premier Tuskegee Airmen and pilots of his time, and Bob Hoover, which we all know also. And both of them would talk about things that they learned deep into their flying experiences that you're like, okay, but you are flying. But they talk about that too. Abby, I wanted to ask you, because you are still in training, but in terms of your experiences with training in a somewhat of a controlled environment, which the Academy is, just share with the audience about that, about how that works on a day-to-day, and your flying experiences and your ground school aspect of it and things like that.
Yes. So United Aviate Academy is a Part 141 flight school, which is very structured and has different requirements from Part 61 flight school. And so I guess I'll talk about Part 61 first, so that the differences are notable. When I was doing flight training back in Maryland, I was doing a Part 61 program, which you basically set your own schedule, you set your own pace, you meet with your instructor whenever you want to go over ground school or to go over flights. And it's a very relaxed, flexible environment where you make your own schedule. Whereas a Part 141 school, Part 141 flight school, there is a syllabus that you have to follow in terms of flight lessons that you have to take, how many hours each flight lesson will be, as well as the number of in-person ground schools you have to go to. And ground school is just an in-class session of learning about different topics in aviation related to the license that you want to get in the moment. And so, my current day-to-day schedule, I would either go to ground school in the morning, have about 2 hours of that, And then I would fly with an instructor in the afternoon for about 2 hours and then do self-studying back at home by myself.
Wow. Yeah. And did you, are there any areas, I guess I'm just asking in general, that you found more challenging than others? Or in other words, what was the easier side of it? Was the actual flying or the ground school, or were they about equal for you?
I would say that the ground school is a bit easier for me just because you're able to spend an unlimited amount of time studying at home on your own. So if there's a topic you don't understand, you can go ahead and find different resources online to help you understand that topic a little bit better, or just talk to friends and get their perspective on the topic. Whereas flying, there's only a set number of hours that you could have in the aircraft to fly. And so there's a little bit of pressure in trying to basically complete the lesson or be proficient in everything that you need to do within that lesson. And then if you start to have difficulties with flying, then you would have to fly more hours. But it's just like ground school is just a lot easier because you are in control of what you can do on the ground, whereas in the air, it's just a limited time to learn everything that you need to learn in the airplane. And everyone always says like the airplane is the worst place to learn. And so learning in the ground first helps with your flying.
Right, exactly. So I think that's a very valid point. Abby, you went to University of Maryland. You got a degree in psychology, and then the next thing you know, you're on a track to become a professional pilot. What did mom and dad have to say about that?
My dad was thrilled. He was like, go for it. This is great. This is like the best thing I've heard. My mom was initially scared for me, just because, I'm her baby. And so she was just scared, like me being in the aircraft alone by myself. She always says prayers for me whenever I'm going to fly by myself. But this career change, I wouldn't say isn't super surprising for my parents or my family, because they've always raised us to be ambitious and to go for whatever we want to do. And so at the end of the day, they were very supportive, and they're still very supportive. And they literally love just telling everyone in any sort of conversation that their daughter is a pilot. Like, it can be completely random. My mom's at the grocery store talking to the cashier, and she'll be like, my daughter's a pilot. And I'm just like, Mom, please stop.
The proud parent. We can't help ourselves. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I think that's one of those things that parents, it's as hard as it is. Sometimes we have to step back and say, okay, let's go ahead, do your thing, do what you want to do, and do what makes you happy. And this is something I actually hear from everybody that is now a professional pilot, even if they've already reached retirement or whatever. And that is, go for something that you're passionate about and that you enjoy, and therefore it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like, you're willing to make whatever effort it is to do that. And it sounds like both you and Abigail have that passion in terms of really enjoying it and getting a lot out of it. So the challenges that you may be facing are secondary. So.
And if I can add on to that, Abby, you touched on a really important thing that I think is a big set of advice for anyone going into aviation, is to find your support group. I hope parents are a big influence on our lives, of course. And if you have supportive parents, that's a huge thing already. But find a group of peers that are in flight training, that may already be in the career that you want, that can support you. All of the organizations, you're a part of Women in Aviation International. There's also the female pilot group, the 99s, and everyone I've heard from, especially women, but also men, everyone in aviation has that group of friends that can encourage them, that they can study with. And when they're going through a difficult time, they can, just someone to talk to that understands a little bit about aviation and can give you advice in that field is a really huge thing in motivation as well. If you have people going through the same things with you, you're like, yeah, we're both flying, and you keep doing it. Otherwise, it can feel, aviation can kind of be lonely when there's only two people in the cockpit. It's you and your flight instructor, and it's not as exciting as sharing it with friends.
Yeah, Abigail, you summarized that perfectly. When I first started flight training, it was just me and my instructor. Like I didn't really have many peers to rely on or to talk to about my experiences, and we had like older mentors. And so then I started to get involved with like my local Women in Aviation chapter and my local 99s chapter, and met a wonderful group of ladies who had similar interests and experiences, who have been there or just like are slightly ahead of me in the program. And then I felt less isolated in my flight training once I started to connect to a community of people. So I definitely recommend for anyone who is starting flight training to find your local support system. There are chapters in every state in this country of people who have interest in aviation and flight training, or pursuing professional piloting. And so I definitely recommend finding a group of support and sticking with them.
And I will say, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, even if there's no group, as someone who's interviewed 200 pilots, I have gotten very few no's to talk about anything aviation. So feel free to reach out to people on social media, on LinkedIn. And really, to me, I was surprised how many pilots were actually already existing in my network of friends. Because when I started asking, do you know anyone who flies? All of a sudden, for a minute there, I thought the whole world was flying.
That's a wide open question. Yeah. No. I'm glad you said that, Kine, because that it's very true. Pilots and folks in aviation like to talk. And if you just ask one question, be prepared that you're going to sit and chat with them for a while, because that's just the way we are. But I think that's a real positive aspect. What I was going to piggyback on and say also, in addition to becoming involved with different associations like you guys mentioned, I also think going to aviation events can be a real positive experience too. And some of the aviation events, like a EAA at Oshkosh, which is just the grand event of the world in aviation, if you can ever make it there, is those type of events, or even smaller ones that are regional at a nearby airport, an air show, of course, and things like that. Those are all great atmospheres to kind of start becoming immersed in it, especially if you're interested in it and thinking about learning to fly. And even if you go to one of the big shows that's at one of the military bases or something like that, they have a lot of their exhibitors are from flight schools and things like that. So it's not just them trying to recruit military pilots, but there's opportunity to talk to somebody about just flying or flying to get your private and things like that, which comes back to Kine and talking about the recreational side or the fun side of just flying just for fun, and realizing that just about anybody, I mean, if you might have to get past a few things like motion sickness or things like that, which is doable, by the way. It's been proven that a number of times that it's a doable thing. But getting past those type of things, or there are people that can fly really good, but handling the radio and talking to air traffic control, it's like a whole nother thing for them, and those type of challenges. And I think that if you can do those type of things that or get past those type of things, that you can really enjoy the fruits of flying and what happens with that. So, as we get to the latter portion of the program, I wanted to kind of go around the room, and I'll start with you, Abigail, the super ambitious 20-year-old and who's already naming the airline. So we think you want to be an airline pilot, but what are your plans at this point? I mean, you're building time, you're instructing, you're probably going to be going for your ATP next. And what are you thinking about in terms of your next direction for your professional pilot career?
Yeah, so I'm between 800 and 900. I have to work on totaling my logbook. That's one thing I didn't think about as an instructor, is you do so much flying, you forget to log your flights. And now I've got months to catch up on. So I still have to build a couple several hundred more hours. So that'll be about a year and a half, depending on how much I fly. And as I'm building my time, I'm going to be looking around for opportunities. Definitely airlines is my end goal, but I know that it's not quite feasible to go directly in there since I'm not a part of a really cool United Aviate Academy. And so I'll definitely probably have to look at regional airlines, which are smaller, that could feed into a major. My end goal, I'd love to fly for Hawaiian Airlines because I love to stay near my roots and I would love to stay in Hawaii. So
So you like to
Hawaiian's
be
my end
based in
goal.
Hawaii. You're already figuring out where you're going to be based.
Exactly. Yeah. But I'm keeping my options open because there are a lot of other pathways, such as corporate jets. That would definitely probably be a really fun
Now you're
venture
speaking my
there.
language. Yeah.
And even possibly the military, which wasn't really something I wanted to do in the beginning. I was like, no, thank you. I don't want to be active duty. I don't want to serve in the military as much as that wasn't the path that I wanted. But I figured out that there's this branch called the Air National Guard that is part-time, not active duty. And so that was something that piqued my interest. So I'm still trying to decide what my priorities are and what kind of lifestyle I'd like to have. So keep my options open, but the end goal is always there. And so it's kind of like a river, you can go, it'll all come back to the ocean, which is the airlines.
Spoken like a true Hawaiian. No, I think that one of the things that is absolutely, and you'd have to be living under a rock not to know, aviation's wide open right now. The opportunities are just abundant, particularly to be a pilot or a mechanic. There has been a lot of change in recent years, some of it related to COVID, but even before the pandemic, there was a shortage of pilots that was starting to come into play. I know that we were in meetings talking about it, 8 years ago. And now it's at full tilt. There's just a heavy need for pilots. So you guys are right on time. The job will be waiting for you as soon as you make the qualifications. But the other thing, everybody automatically thinks airline. Even when you're in school, if you're on an aviation professional pilot track, use the airlines. And one of the reasons is airlines do need pilots, but airlines are also very engaged with most aviation-centric universities. So they push really hard for it. But there are so many other opportunities. I know a young man who used to be an intern at National Business Aviation Association, NBAA, and then he ended up getting a job as a cargo pilot, flying, I think he was flying right seat in a small Lear up in Chicago and things like that. And I think he's doing something similar now or whatever. But my point is, I mentioned it before, you can be a cargo pilot, you can be a corporate pilot. Corporate is a hard path because they have some pretty stiff qualifications because you're flying some very important people around. But it's still a possibility because it depends on the size of the company, the size of their fleet. Some fleets and small companies have, they have single engine turboprops as their company aircraft, because maybe they cover 3 or 4 states and a group of restaurants or something like that. So so when you think corporate, you don't have to think Fortune 500. There's other possibilities. And when you think cargo, Textron Aviation has the new Sky Courier. That's a new aircraft for regional cargo transportation tied in with FedEx, and that aircraft has single pilot capability, meaning that you can be in there and be in the right seat and be getting experience and learning at the same time. So all of those type of things exist, which is the whole point of trying to let everybody that watches and listens to this show know that it goes beyond just the norm, for lack of a better way to put it. Abby, how about you? You're in the middle of your training with the United Aviate Academy, and where do you see yourself going? What are your goals? I mean, I guess you're going to fly for United one day.
Yeah. So the nice thing about United Aviate Academy is that you're essentially guaranteed a route to United Airlines. Going to United Aviate Academy puts you in the Aviate program, which is a separate thing from the Academy, but the Aviate program is a guaranteed route to United. You have to go through a regional airline first for about 2 years, and then you transition to United mainline. So for me right now, I'm working on my certified flight instructor license, so I can soon be like Abigail, and I will be able to teach other people how to become pilots. And I think I'll do that for about 2 years or so until I get my 1,500 hours to transition to a regional airline within the Aviate program. And then I'll be there for about another 2 years before transitioning to United mainline. But the good thing about the Aviate program is that you don't have to be a flight instructor in order to get your 1,500 hours. You can build your time any way you want to. So I could like go back home, rent a plane, and just fly around for fun and build my time that way. Or I can go to a small cargo operation to build my time. So there are different opportunities that I have to build my time before going to a regional airline.
Yeah, sounds like you have it well thought out. Both of you guys do. Yeah, I wanted to mention too that the other thing that's an opportunity for both of you, but particularly for you, Abigail, is that yes. By the way, United does fly to Hawaii all the time. I wouldn't be surprised if they have a semi base there. So if you're in United, you're interested in United, that factor is there. But the other thing is that there are other airlines, sorry, United, that do also have similar programs that allow for the transition to become a pilot, an airline pilot. But one of the things I will say to you too, flying regionally used to be a poor man's pilot job. No longer. They are paying regional pilots really well. They're giving bonuses, and they're poaching regional pilots pretty quickly into the major airlines. So that opens up a lot of opportunities for new pilots to come in, fly the regional, build the time, and then move into the airline thing. So just an FYI on that for you guys. As we wrap things up, what I always like to do is take your experiences and ask you, if you would, to share your thoughts and experiences and advice, your words of wisdom, if you will, to our audience. And I'm going to start with you, Kine, with the book that you've written and what you hope people get out of it, but also just everything you've experienced to date. What would you recommend to people that are, considering or have been thinking about, or it's somewhat on their radar of learning to fly?
I'm a huge fan of doing intro flight and taking it from there. Even if you go and do an intro flight and you end up hating it, you can decide you want to go back and try it again, or you can decide that's not for you, but you've had an experience that a lot of people don't get to experience. And I will say for me, it opened up doors. Even just days after my first intro flight, I said, I flew. And then all of a sudden I got invitations to see corporate jets that I wouldn't have had I not flown. And my list of unexpected adventures is just so long at this point. But, I met my significant other through this world.
Wow.
I've met amazing people and friendships and, famous people or not famous people that I would have never connected with had there not been that bond of aviation. So I would say if you have even just a desire to test it out, go test it out. And how you get to the ultimate certification, if that's a private pilot license or professional, just start with doing an intro flight.
Have you inspired others, friends or acquaintances or folks to start taking flight or consider taking flying lessons?
It's honestly been the most gratifying part of writing this book, and then also of releasing it, is the emails and text messages I get from people who have started taking flying lessons, and even people who use my list of questions to do the research. And yeah, so that's been really gratifying for me.
Cool. I'm looking. Oh, there it is. I wanted to show the book real quick. I feel like I'm doing an infomercial or something, but anyhow.
Well, thank you.
Abby, how about you? What words of wisdom do you have for a young lady who went and did her thing in college, got her degree in psychology, and boom, she is on track to be a professional pilot?
Yeah, my piece of advice would be to connect yourself to other people, make your wishes known publicly about what you want to do with your flying journey or your career. There are so many people out there who want to invest in you and want to invest in your future, and you don't even know it. There's so many resources and opportunities out there. And so I definitely just recommend making yourself known to different organizations that, hey, I'm just starting out flight training. I'm considering doing this professionally. And there will be a swarm of people who are your support system, who are rallying for you, who would connect you to resources such as scholarships or people who could, or flight schools who could do your discovery flight for you. And so I definitely just recommend being public with your desires about wanting to fly, and then finding people who could support you, because there's a sea of pilots out here who love sharing our passion for aviation with others, and love when other people finally commit to pursuing this as either a hobby or a career. We love sharing our passion for aviation with other people. And so there are plenty of people out there who would love to help you in your journey.
Very well said. Couldn't have said it better. Abigail, take us home. Take us to Krispy Kreme.
I will definitely. If any of you ever come to Hawaii, I would love to fly with you. You, Kine and Abby, touched on lots of the big points. Some words of advice I would give is to, if financial need is a thing for scholarships, apply to everything. My first scholarship I did as just a practice because I didn't think I was going to get it, and I got it, and it started me on this wonderful journey. So don't ever just try everything. If you persevere is one big thing as well. There's going to be obstacles. We don't always go flying. Every single flight we evaluate. Sometimes timing is going to be perfect. It may not be now, it may be later. And it doesn't matter how old you are. You can be 15, you can be 50, you can be 70. I have students from all ages. All of them just love to fly and are interested in it. And there's no limitation to whether you can fly. The sky is not the limit.
Absolutely. And I'm going to just piggyback on it and say that I wanted to add one other thing that we didn't mention this entire show, and that's internships. If you're in school or finishing up school and you get an opportunity to get into an internship program, aviation related, go for it, because it's the best way to really get exposed to aspects of the industry that may be beneficial to you, even if it's not you actually flying. And one of the reasons I point that out is that I think that a lot of people don't realize that, for example, if you were interested in corporate flying, and corporate flying is a tough one, it's a hard one to get into because of the requirements, but you could work for a flight department as an intern, for a summer or whatever the case may be. You're going to learn a lot in that process, and it's going to put you in a position of connecting with some people in the business aviation world that may, in fact, be very helpful to you forwarding your career. The other part of it is, and we did touch base on this, join these organizations, being a member. Most of them have student memberships. Some of them are free. Actually, most of them are free if you're a student, that you can join these organizations and be a member, become involved with what they do, get to know other folks in the industry and things like that. And they can become really helpful. I have to throw in a shameless plug. AOPA and EAA are both great organizations for just flying as a private pilot, as a hobby, as Kine likes to put it. But they're great organizations for that. And they have tons of resources that, kind of overlap with each other and offer great opportunities. Ladies, it has been really great talking with all of you. And boy, what incredible information you guys have provided. Can't thank you enough for taking the time to join the call, and wish you all the best. Abigail, wish you the best with your rocket fire career, and you too, Abby, the same. I know people are going, Abigail, Abby, isn't he talking to the same person? No. No, but seriously, wish you guys the very best. Kine, wish you the best with your book. I'm going to finish reading it, and I appreciate having that opportunity. I think you've touched on a nerve that a lot of people outside of aviation can relate to very well. So thank you all for joining All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
It's been an absolute pleasure. So, well, that was really a lot of fun. I'd like to thank everybody for joining our conversation. I hope that any of you who has given any kind of thought to learning to fly, or are already flying and thinking of pursuing it as a career, learn something new today. As always, and as with every show, I try to provide as much information and insight as possible into the opportunities and the possibilities for any and everyone who has an interest in all aspects of aviation and aerospace. You've been watching and listening to All Things Aviation and Aerospace, presented by Private Air Media. If you haven't already, I'd ask that you please subscribe. But until next time, please take care, stay safe, find some blue skies, and have a good one.